And people wondered about the title, Ferrying Secrets. And I have a title poem in the book also called Ferrying Secrets. And many of the poems in the first part of that book were written during a period when I was actively working out this idea of being in two worlds. Because I'm from India. I came in 1968 at the height of the war, Vietnam, Cambodia. Young Americans were flying on their lethal mission out east, and I was flying west. They were flying east on a deadly mission, and I was flying west, fleeing my father in a way, whom I loved, and coming to a place where I, for the first time, discovered a peace movement. I got very heavily involved with anti-war activity at that time, the nuclear freeze movement, and so on. In fact, one of the earliest memories was at Stony Brook, where I did my PhD. I had the privilege of hearing every major poet of the day, Ginsberg and Snyder and Levertov and Lowell and Robert Duncan, and all of these people came through. And they were all in a state of heightened awareness and desperation in those days. And I remember Gary Snyder had just come through Japan and India and talked about loving the planet and how important it was for me to hear that. In fact, after his talk, I stood in front of a bulldozer that was leveling a whole knoll of trees because I was inspired to do something. I was young, 23 years old. And of course, what happened that night was symptomatic of the whole peace movement. That I stood in front of the bulldozer, stopped the bulldozer, and then went home to sleep. And the bulldozer came at night and did it. And that was sort of symbolic of the whole peace movement. Oh. That we were all worked up about it, but many of us did not have the staying power. The Ferrying Secrets had to do with sort of gradually and progressively realizing I had come from an ancient land, and I was waking up to the fact that I did not know much about my own heritage. And I was discovering those secrets, and I suddenly saw myself as the ferryman who had the duty and the responsibility to bring this cache of incredible wisdom from India. The secrets, now 40 years later, I've been in this country now for 40 years, and there's a lot of talk about how this whole politics of post-colonialism and multiculturalism and all that is over because of globalization. Globalization is flattening things out, everywhere. It is a monoculture.
So the nuances are being lost.
Absolutely, everything is lost. With nuances, the poetry in the best sense is being lost. And yet there is a part of me which says that people may accuse me of being a throwback, but this whole business of two worlds and not the clash of cultures, which the right wing would really like to push on the world, that there is a clash of culture. There isn't. But the notion of different worlds, different sensibilities that impinge on each other, that in subtle ways reorder the nature of things, get people to see things ever so slightly differently. That is not gone. And so I feel that even though many of the poems were written in the 1980s, in Ferrying Secrets, I'm still in that mode partly because I am still in the process of discovering those secrets. But anyway, I was trying to sort of talk a little bit about the secrets, and that's a huge, interesting topic. But one thing that is worth knowing, I think, from a poetic point of view, is that Indian culture is a very oral culture. So a lot of the great Indian epics, for instance, before they were set down, were simply spoken.
Sure.
And the sacred texts, the Vedas and the Upanishads, you can see that the transmission of these, because it is a religious act, had to be absolutely perfect. So from the earliest stages, kids would start memorizing. And this is one of the things that I rage about, because my little community, which was originally probably converted at the point of a gun by the Portuguese, we were Hindus, we were deprived of the depth of Indian culture, because we were very Western in orientation, more Roman than Rome. I was a Jesuit product and all of that. They were great, but they had a very serious blind spot. And that had to do with not knowing what India was about. They were totally looking at the world through a Western lens.
Yeah.
And he is my buddy, and he is part of my life. So when I speculate about the oral tradition in India, the Vedas, the Upanishads, and the epics, and how they were kept away from me, and how it's been my preoccupation in my adult life and in my 40 years in this country to recover a little bit of that. I don't know Sanskrit, but my own languages, Konkani and Kannada and so on, all Indian languages have a lot of Sanskrit in them.
How many Indian languages are there?
There are about 16 major Indian languages.
Wow.
And maybe 3,000, depending on how you slice and dice them, 3,000 to 5,000 dialects.
Wow.
I myself speak Konkani is my mother tongue, and Kannada is the regional language, Tulu is the language of my town. So I grew up speaking all of them, and Hindi is the national language. In fact, I can't think of any culture that is more diverse than India. In fact, I just have to go 30 miles south of my hometown to be in a region where I'm not understood and I do not understand them.
Wow.
Is it that?